Three of the foremost experts on burnout, Christina Maslach, Michael Leiter, and Susan E. Jackson, agreed that burnout is an occupational phenomenon. In 1981, the team was responsible for developing the Maslach Burnout Inventory, MBI, an assessment intended to help organizations gather data to better navigate the unknowns of burnout. 40 years later, their findings would become the basis for the WHO announcement. Maslach, Leiter, and Jackson defined burnout as a psychological syndrome emerging as a prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. The three key dimensions of this response are overwhelming exhaustion, feelings of cynicism and detachment from the job, and a sense of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. Although these three dimensions, exhaustion, cynicism, and professional efficacy, helped us understand the negative outcomes of burnout, it remained a challenge to reliably detect them in ourselves and others. As the MBI has evolved through 4 editions, it continues to be the best benchmark for measuring burnout and the strongest defense against it, when its results are interpreted properly. However, leaders often struggle to administer the MBI correctly or interpret the MBI's findings, rendering their best weapon as useless or even harmful. Maslach and Leiter discuss these misuses and explain how organizations can avoid them in Chapter 24 of this guide. Burnout may also hide in the data when leaders look to measures like engagement and productivity as yardsticks for well-being, which often grossly misdiagnose underlying issues like stress, anxiety, and subsequently burnout. High performers are excellent at meeting productivity goals and often self-report as engaged even when they are highly stressed and burned out. Researchers at Plasticity Labs conducted a study that analyzed 3,500 educational professionals over 3 years and found that in all roles, engagement was high. For years, leaders had used this measure as the foundation for their strategic wellness programming and resource allocations. Only when the researchers started to gather data specific to well-being and other social-emotional factors like hope, efficacy, resilience, stress, and overall happiness levels, did they realize that although employees were engaged, many were burned out and significantly unwell. To detect the things we cannot see, we have to ask better questions further upstream. A simple yet powerful question is to ask your employees, what is the single biggest frustration you are experiencing right now? Typically, the problems are just small, irritating daily experiences that chip away at people. They are the broken-down printers at the nurse's station that force staff to run down the hall to the working printer for their patients' printouts, despite the $100 cost for repair. They show up in coffee you have to pay for in the break room because times are tight. They appear when working from home means you have to post to Slack every time you take a 5-minute break. They appear in excruciating ways, as when an email pops up from your boss at 10 p.m. with a not-so-subtle expectation for a response. They are the bathroom stalls where you have to pump your breast milk because there is no other private place. They are the empty parking spots you drive past, reserved for VIPs who never use them, and the exorbitant budgets for things you can never use. These few examples are all preventable. Yet, if there are no mechanisms to monitor issues like these, or anyone asking the staff what is gnawing at them, they end up being like a sickness that festers and spreads. Burnout can be detected. We can see the unseen. It just requires an intentional and frequent interest in how people are feeling and a commitment to follow through. It also helps to identify which groups are at the highest risk. Caregiver syndrome and passion-driven burnout. The Mayo Clinic describes the list of job burnout risk factors as: you identify so strongly with work that you lack balance between your work life and your personal life. You have a high workload, including overtime work. You try to be everything.